So we're really lucky today to be joined by the newish executive director of Nisqually Community Forest, Marco Pinchot, who's a close partner of ours in this work. Um, and he has he knows his way around some mushroom foraging and some other kinds of foraging, some extra fungal foraging, as we've called it. So we're going to start off just chatting together a little bit and then open it up for questions and comments after about 20 minutes or so. And so what I wanted to start with was just by asking Marco, what is like, let's, obviously people are jealously guard their mushrooming spots. So one of the jokes when I was living down in Northern California was, where do you find your mushrooms? And I'd say, oh, about a few miles inland from where I look for abalone. So you don't want to give away too much, but there's all this fresh ground out there. So I was going to start off by asking Marco, what do you do when you come to a spot an area you've never been to, and you start foraging around?
Well, first of all, hello everybody. Yeah, I'm Marco Pinchot, and new to the Nisqually Community Forest, but have spent m much of my life in the woods, and I mean, I guess with thinking about mushroom foraging, I have places that I like to go for certain things. So I think that that's part of it. Is that it's not always just exploring. It's knowing that like, oh, if I'm gonna be going to I could go to the coast and there's these areas down by the dunes, and I know that there's certain mushrooms in certain seasons that are going to be there, and so I'll be like going specifically for a specific mushroom. That's one way. But then also, like, we live in Olympia and kind of outside of Olympia, and there's a nice trail network behind our house that we walk like almost every day year round with our dogs. And this time of year when stuff starts popping, we start seeing all kinds of different things. So yeah, if I'm going to be exploring a place specifically like with a basket, like trying to actually collect mushrooms, I guess I would first start thinking about know where you're going and know how to get home, those kinds of things. Make sure that if you're going far from home, safety first. Um, there's some tools I like to have. I like to have a nice sharp knife to clean up my mushrooms before I put them in my basket because I don't want a lot of dirt in the basket. Keep it out of the gills, so have to do less cleanup when I get home. And then I like getting off trail and really knowing thinking about what kind of trees are there, what kind of understory shrubs are there. Are there specific things that I know have associations? The Ericaceae family, which has our salal and our manzanita and our madrone trees and all of our blueberries and those have a lot of associates with mycorrhizal fungi. So if I kind of see those, I might start poking around kind of underneath there. Or if I'm looking at you know what kind of like duff there might be that I'm thinking, okay, this kind of is starting to get a chanterelle kind of feel to it. Or if I'm going looking for logs that are down, if I'm looking for mushrooms that are saprophytic mushrooms that grow out of logs, decomposers.
Hmm.
And some of my favorite ones are those types that grow out of
Hmm.
logs. So really, it depends on where I am. But I would say that seasonally, we are like right now is the moment, right? So if it's we've had rain, we're about to get more rain, and before it freezes, now's the time
Hmm.
to start looking.
Well, you said something buried in that comment that I want to circle back to, which is you said that there's certain kinds of understory or certain kinds of duff that make you think chanterelle. Um, what
Yeah.
are those? What turns you on to the chanterelle?
Well, I mean, I often see them kind of like in areas where there is a nice thick duff, where there's some moss around, poking out of those kinds of areas, you're in a Doug fir dominated kind of lower elevation forest. But really, like the thing about chanterelles is that they're a mycorrhizal fungus. So like they live in association with plants. And so that means that if you find one, in a spot, even if you don't want to eat that one, let's say you find one
Mhm.
that's rotten and old, right? But you're sure what it is, you can remember that spot and then you can go back to it every year. And there'll be chanterelles there every year when after the rain, if it's a good year. And so
It's a
get your
great use
spots.
case for your own personal layer in Google Maps,
Well,
right?
yeah, yeah, exactly. So hold that one up against Seth. That's a very special one. So like the most common one that people find around here is the golden chanterelle, but this is a white chanterelle, which is just even firmer and really, really special. If you can find them there. And yeah, so I've had a few places that I've, known that they were, and they also grow really big, much bigger than the golden chanterelles. So
Mhm. But you were telling me also when we were chatting before this that chanterelles aren't even necessarily your favorite mushroom. Um,
yeah. I mean, they smell nice, and they certainly have a wonderful aroma to it. But
mhm,
I wouldn't put them on my top five list for sure. A
mhm,
lot of people think of them, as being some of their favorites, but um, I've also had some stomach upset problems with them in the past, and some people do have that, and I think that's an important sort of cautionary tale about mushrooms is that different people react differently to them, and you should try a little bit before if you're sure what you have and it's considered a safe mushroom, you know, don't gorge on a ton of them the first time you eat them. Uh, Eat some and see how you feel, because some people do react differently to them. And then always thoroughly cook mushrooms, wild mushrooms that you're finding in the forest. There are very few mushrooms that are safe to eat raw. And in and when I see even when I see like commercial like button mushrooms, white button mushrooms, or which are grown commercially, and I see in a restaurant that they've sliced them and put them on a salad raw, that's a cringe for me. I'm like, why are they doing that? That is not a good idea.
mhm,
Um, yeah, I would certainly never eat mushrooms like that raw.
mhm. Wow. All
Yeah,
right.
yeah, dry saute them down until they're reduced, and then cook them back with butter or something like that. There's a lot of different ways to cook them, but yeah, for chanterelles, you want to dry saute them until all the water's out, and then come back with your butter and your seasoning.
Does
Um,
everyone know what a dry saute is? They might not. So imagine heating
yeah,
up a cast iron pan with a little salt in it, slice up the mushrooms, lay them in there. When you put them in the hot pan, these mushrooms, which because you're picking them in the rainy season, they tend to be full of water, so that water will all kind of cook out into almost be poaching them, and then that water will evaporate, and then you can turn the heat down, add a little oil to the pan, and as
right.
you say, oil or
Yeah,
butter.
and even if they're not wet, like they're
Mhm.
gonna put off an enormous amount of water and shrink way down. So yeah, I had seen even in some restaurants that, people had these beautiful little chanterelles and they were just barely poaching them or something. And, they kept their shape and they were serving them because they're so pretty. And that seems like a bad idea to me.
All right, well, you've been warned.
You've
Um,
been warned. Cook your mushrooms.
uh, you were saying that one of the things that I've thought about mushrooms, because there are so many of them, right? You could you could, and some people do, spend a lot of time trying to identify and recognize all the mushrooms in their local area.
Hmm.
But I have been less ambitious about this, and I've tried to recognize just the ones that are delicious and the ones that are really poisonous. And everything else I can just lump in the category of, well, that's an interesting and beautiful looking mushroom, but I'm not going to worry about what kind of Rusula it is, for example,
Hmm. Yeah,
what kind of Platycibe. Yeah.
yeah, and I think that that's a great approach if you're a beginner is to kind of you know think about what your top five are that you really want to learn, or it's fine to kind of bring a basket back, and if you have an ID book, you can try and learn a variety of mushrooms, but a lot of the less the LBMs, the little brown mushrooms, are very hard to ID without you need a microscope, or you need to be doing spore prints. A lot of mushrooms are challenging to ID. So I wouldn't really mess around with those as sort of someone who's looking to eat mushrooms.
You don't keep a life list the way a birder might.
I don't know.
Mm.
I mean, I have to admit that I am, I'm married to a mycologist, right? So my wife is like, she really knows all the little weird, obscure ones because she teaches it. And but For me, yeah, there's a bunch of them that I like that are good to eat, and that's the ones that I'm going to go after. And So, like some of those like really easy to identify ones that are really common. One would be lobster mushrooms. So lobster mushrooms, it's something that you see in restaurants a lot. And interestingly, the lobster mushroom is not actually, um, it's actually a russula, a white one that has been parasitized by another mushroom. And so the parasite has sort of eaten the whole thing and turned it into that bright orange lobster mushroom. Um, so really, really interesting one, very firm texture, really, really nice taste, and one that you'll see in grocery stores from time to time, and you'll certainly see on menus of restaurants, and one that is really, really easy to identify. Another one that's really easy to identify is the hedgehog mushroom. It has little spikes that kind of like stalactites almost that kind of hang off the bottom where the gills would be, and they're very firm. And they're similar to a chanterelle in sort of their texture and where you find them, and that they are a mycorrhizal that you'll find in the same place time after time. Um, and and then another one that I would, to kind of diversify, there are decomposer mushrooms that grow very large, and there's kind of three different ones that I think are great to learn. One is the common name is lion's mane. They're hericiums. There's lion's mane and boar's head are kind of two different, bear's head are kind of two different hericiums, and they're like a large, they can get to be as big as your head. They can get to be really big, and they grow off of a dead log or a dead tree. And again, there's no lookalikes for those. Once you kind of learn what they look like, they're very, very safe and very easy to identify. Um, and then chicken of the woods is the other one that people often learn early. Bright orange yellow grows off the side of a tree. Soft.
That's one that makes me sick, unfortunately.
Yeah, and so that's a great example that everyone's a little different, and the first time that you try it, don't eat a ton of them. So, um, yeah, that's and then there's kind of the more advanced ones that like you do want to like know your stuff a little bit more. Like once you get into the boletes, like the boletus edgeless, the king bolete, the porcini. And if you want to know what my number one favorite mushroom is, that's my number one favorite mushroom. That one's at the very
Mm.
top of the list. But any large white mushroom, you should really, um, you know, be careful. Know your stuff. And that's like especially true of like the other kind of top of the list mushroom, the matsutake or the pine mushroom, another large white mushroom that is wonderful, but is you know, can be mistaken for the really dangerous ones if as a beginner,
Hmm.
you know, um,
And
because
that's a bolete. Is that a bolete also?
it's not a bolete. No, no,
Mm.
it's a guild mushroom.
Mm.
And But it has a wonderful kind of spicy aroma to it. Some people can say that it smells kind of like red hot candies or a combination of red hots and sweaty gym socks. Um, and It has a very firm texture, and it has a great flavor to it, and it's a very expensive and sort of prized mushroom. But um, the risk with all of these is that the other large white mushroom that is the Amanita phalloides, which accounts for 90% of all mushroom deaths globally. So it is by far the most dangerous mushroom, and it's also large and white. So large white mushrooms are where you really want to like be a little bit more of an expert before you or at least have seen them before and know your stuff before you mess with them. And really where the danger with the between the pine mushroom and the amanita mushroom is when they're in their very smallest stage of their life, when they're just a little button. That's when they're hard to distinguish. Once they fully kind of open up, they are different in some very important ways. Um, but yeah, so that's where people get into trouble is trying to pick the little ones.
Right. And also, never when you're doing mushroom ID, should you ever say, Oh, well, it has 5 out of the 6 characteristics that I see here in the key.
Mhm.
That's probably good enough. It's probably not good enough. So,
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So if I was starting out, I'd be looking at chanterelles, hedgehogs, lobsters, chicken of the woods, and then maybe some of those kind of larger, more really unique ones that grow off of trees.
mhm.
The other one that a lot of people learn early is oyster mushrooms and angel wings. And they're ones that can be cultivated very easily in backyard gardens and things. But a lot of people do react to those. So I tend to not recommend them because there are, some people do get upset stomachs with oyster mushrooms. So I tend
Hmm.
to not recommend them, but I know some people love them. Um,
Mhm. Me too.
yeah,
Um, so before we open it up to broader conversation, mushrooms are a piece of the foraging puzzle, but come as you say, when the ground freezes over, um, the mushroom season will be over. But then we can look forward to spring, and spring brings with it all kinds of other great delights.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, do you want to
Really,
mention a couple of the ones that you were telling us about before at the beginning here?
well, I mean, we always really look forward to stinging nettle season. Stinging nettle is just a very important part of our diet. We have some places in the woods where there are, huge sort of expanses of it. And I think people who aren't familiar with it might be a little bit worried because it hurts if you touch it. Um, but it is such a nutritious plant, and if you learn how to harvest it with gloves on, I just wear like disposable nitrile gloves when I'm harvesting it, and that's plenty of protection. And although some people don't even use gloves because they kind of just don't mind the stinging, but I wouldn't recommend that myself. But
Mm.
um, and then yeah,
Whatever turns you on, right?
but yeah, I guess so. We just go out there with like grocery bags and just like try and fill up a whole bunch of grocery bags and bring back a big harvest. When we're harvesting it, in the spring when it first comes up, you'll see the really tender little shoots, little new growth, which will have like two leaves going this way, two going this way, and kind of an apical like a growing part right at the top. And below that will be a branch, like branches. And just like when you're picking basil. Like, if you're in your garden and you have basil and you want to pick it, you want to pick it above that little branch so that you'll get two new shoots off of it. And so you can cultivate your own backyard or backwoods or place nearby stinging nettle patch by just picking just that little top part. And then come back a week later and you'll have two little top parts where you left it. And so you can harvest it again. And that way the plant still has plenty to grow. Your patch will get stronger over time, not weaker over time, and you can keep coming back to it. And then when we get home, there's some wonderful things. You can just steam it like spinach, and it's just great that way with garlic. Once you steam it at all all those little stinging needles get soft and they're not an issue at all. But probably, when we're making a lot of it, getting a lot of it, we make pesto. That's kind of our favorite thing is to just kind of jam it into a big Vitamix blender with, and break it down and make your pesto with your olive oil and your garlic and, your uh, pine nuts or other nuts that you might have. And then we'll pour it into ice cube trays, freeze it, and then put it up so that we have stinging nettle pesto in ice cube trays like for months. And so
Until the basil comes in, right?
yeah, when I say that it's like a regular part of our diet, I mean it's like our kids were like raised on stinging nettle pesto. It's like a real, like,
And they like it.
yeah. I mean it tastes great, and it's not like you wouldn't really know that it's. I don't know. That's what they think pesto is. Basil's
Mm.
good too, but that's.
I see we have a question. Let's let that question in, and then before we go on and talk a little bit more about some other foraging things.
Yeah.
Carl? No?
Can you hear me now? Actually,
Yes.
this is Lorna Smith,
All
and
right.
I'm sorry we're late, but we got kind of excited about some stuff with our land and the beavers. They're checking the beavers, and we have a really good record for beavers here. Anyway, what I wanted to say, and if anybody's interested in this, what I do with the nettles is I was in a bad accident in '72 and I have a deformed leg from it, and it's kind of affected me now that I'm in my 70s. And so, what I did is I went ahead and I write kind of like a blog called Country Moment. And what I did about 2 years ago, 2021, I guess it was. Um, I had years before that helped my mom when she had her surgery on her foot, her knee and leg hurt, and so one of the surgeons said that she should use capsaicin. Well, I said to myself, what about nettles? Because it's a German tradition to use them. Kind of you kind of almost have two kinds of ideas of pain going on. You have that pain where you know it's going to hurt all the time, but you have to always be on guard. And then you have the pain you have from a nettle. And so what I do is, especially when I work harder than my body wants me to, I use it on my bad leg, and even sometimes if I weed whack too much, I'll use it on my back and just kind of whip it on there or tap tap tap. The first time I tried it, and I tell it in the article, um, that I thought, what in the heck are you doing to yourself? Because I knew how it feels, from growing up on a farm here. Anyway, so my email is HEALTOES, the number one, at gmail.com. And of course, now the nettles are going to be going, we're freezing now at our place, 26 degrees. And so what I do is I put covers over some of the nettles, and so I can prolong them. But
well, maybe you can put your email address in the chat, and
okay,
yeah,
and then
people can get in
share
touch if they have some more questions. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I share. I let's see. What remember the doctor's name?
Maybe you could put your blog, the URL for your blog in there as well. People could follow up.
Well, here's the issue on that. Well, if you're interested, I'll just put my email and people can ask me for it.
Very good.
Because
I'd like to just add that the Native Americans also use this
that's right.
to treat arthritis. And I've used it myself because I was in a bad accident in 1974, and it actually does work, even though it doesn't sound appetizing. So just thought I'd let you know.
All right, another satisfied customer.
Yeah, and that's I had heard that before, that people use it therapeutically that way. And honestly, like I don't mind a little bit of nettle on, stinging on the leg. It doesn't last that long. It's like, 15, 20 minutes. It's,
sure prefer it to poison oak. I'll just say that.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. Not even in the same way. Yeah. And if you're harvesting nettle and you want to just show your friends how cool you are, there's not a lot of the little stingers on the bottom of the leaf. So you can kind of carefully grab the bottom of a leaf, fold it up so that none of them, and then eat it raw. And that's how you can just prove just how into your nettles you are, I think.
All right. And what are some other spring foraging? I'll say one thing that I've liked, and I don't collect a lot of these, but sometimes I'm out walking in the woods and the salmonberry shoots have just come up, and you can break off one of those big, fat, juicy salmonberry shoots and peel the outside off, and the inside is delicious. Really? It's like celery almost. Well, more delicious than celery. Celery is not much to write home about, but imagine celery if it had flavor.
That's great. I've never done that, and I have a lot of salmonberry by my house. So that's, yeah. And which kind of, I guess, brings me in, not so much early spring. Salmonberry is kind of one of the first berries, early on, but once we get into summer, there's so many great berries. And if people wanted to like kind of dip their toe in the foraging river, I mean, really, you probably already have. Like, if you're eating berries out in the woods, you are already a forager. And it's, how many of our native berries do you know? I mean, there's a lot. There's a lot in that rubus group that has salmonberry. And rubus is kind of like the general term for like those berries that are in clusters, right? But we've got a trailing blackberry, we've got a black cap blackberry that's really nice. Even like the non-native Himalayan blackberry is very delicious, and that's the one that you're going to see around a lot of places. There's another non-native one that we have a lot in our property, which I like even less than the Himalayan from a thorn perspective. That's called the cut leaf that is really has curved thorns that really get into you.
Mhm.
But the berry in that one is delicious as well. Um, and then, but probably my favorite of all of those is the thimbleberry. And there's just something so delicate about it. And it's it really grows in those kind of really shady, kind of really moist spots. And there's just a really unique flavor to the thimbleberry. So if you haven't tried a thimbleberry straight off of a bush, it's probably my favorite of all those. Salmon berries, I'm really interested. I'm going to try the salmon berry trick that you're talking about, Seth, about eating some of the stem. They're not really my favorite berry. I mean,
Mm,
they're relatively kind of like bland tasting, not particularly sweet compared to all these other
mm,
ones. But that's neat that the stem can be eaten
mhm.
as well. That's really cool.
Hi, you
Even
guys.
before the berries.
I can I ask a question? I
Mhm.
put, I put my hand up, but I didn't know if somebody's calling on people or if we just butt in.
Go ahead, Becky.
Hi. So, my name's Becky. I live on the Olympic Peninsula. This is the first time joining this group. So, I don't
Welcome.
know how I found it. I own some forest land up on the peninsula, but I've recently taken a lot of courses from WSU and Department of Natural Resources on forest ownership, making your forest is more healthy, etc. Before we move away too far from mushrooms, I have two questions for Marco. Hi.
Mhm.
One is you mentioned boletes as your favorite. Which one? Which species?
I mean, Boletus edulis, the
Edulus. Okay.
king bolete is,
Yeah.
that's the one that I like that we specifically go and have places and go and like try and buy, pick like a bunch
Sure.
and dry them and you can make all sorts of wonderful things about it. I went on a backpacking trip this end of the summer and we found some at Elevation and ate augmented all of our backcountry meals with them. So they're really really wonderful. But there's
Where do you find that one? I see the boletes. I've been during COVID. I started learning my mushrooms. I'm a botanist actually.
yeah.
It's been great. I had to go, be in the woods and be with a friend, but separated, and it was a perfect time for me to start learning about the mushrooms.
Mhm.
If most of the boletes I see are, wormy, so I've done very little of consuming boletes.
Yeah.
That one a coastal one, or generally where do you find edulus?
Well, so two very distinct places. So
Mhm.
one is coastal. So, going out to the coast and in that zone that's kind of like between the dunes and when you're in that kind of pine, scrub oak kind of a forest that's very sandy. That's a great place for them. So, I mean,
So in the pines.
yep, all
So I'm looking for pines. Okay. Um,
amongst those kind of piney areas that are, between the dunes and just straight out on the coast. You'll find them all over the place.
I'm going out next week, so I'll be looking because it's good
Yeah.
timing, isn't it?
And then the other place is at elevation. So, getting up into like a hemlock forest above 3,000 feet.
Okay.
That's another place where you get them. But and there's some very close relatives, the queen and the prince, basically that are very
Uh-huh.
similar to a king bolete, and are also really good to eat.
Okay.
And but like the first thing to kind of know about boletes is that there are boletes and then there are slippery jacks. And a
Yeah.
lot of what you find in the lower land are going to be those slippery jacks. So yeah, he found a slippery jack earlier. And the way you can
Mhm.
tell the difference is that in the spores, the tubes, so boletes don't have gills, they have
Right.
tubes, right?
Sure.
And the tubes on a bolete are very round and very even. And on a slippery jack, there's a variety of different sizes,
Oh,
and they're not perfectly round.
oh, cool. Thanks.
So that's just like a quick kind of, put them into two different categories.
Great. Didn't know. Okay.
But I've never eaten slippery jacks, and I don't think I'm really interested in eating any of them. But I tend to only eat really mushrooms I know and are going to be delicious. But
Work on my second question, if
yeah,
you don't mind. Do you happen to have any famous relatives?
yes. Yeah, I mean, we didn't even do an introduction about forestry, which is honestly what Seth and I do in our day jobs.
Oh yeah, what do you do?
I run the Nisqually Community Forest, and with and NNRG is our ecological forestry
Okay, we're putting in a community
contractor.
forest up here in Jefferson County.
Well, you should talk to
Chicopee
NNRG.
Ridge.
They're the experts in this field. But yeah, Marco's my nickname. Gifford Pinchot is my the fourth is my legal name. So
Okay, cool.
yeah, yep. Great. Well, should we go back to other plants, or where do we want to go from here,
I'd
Seth?
say, why don't we just take other questions from people? I start to see some comments in the chat too. I saw
That's
Leafy
great.
in
Yeah.
there. And, just try to, just so we get to everyone, maybe keep your remarks to maybe a minute or so, and then make sure we're having conversation.
Great.
Yeah,
Look at
there's a question in the chat. Lee Jimerson asked, I tried cooking down blue elderberries unsuccessfully. Cooked for over 40 minutes. Seeds, oops, let's see. Seeds, there we are. Seeds were still very crunchy and sharp. I didn't add sugar and was fine with tart, but the taste wasn't nice. Any suggestions?
Yeah, I mean, I have certainly don't have a lot of experience with elderberry. So I mean, we could look it up, but it's
I do.
let's hear it then.
Hi, Becky again. So I've planted my first so the blue elderberries tend to be more on the east side, but they tend to be coming over here more on the west side, which I'm thrilled about. They're a little bit different habitat than the red ones, which was my mistake. They need more shade than I gave them. I planted several or half a dozen of them 6 years ago. They're like almost 20 feet tall. They're just monsters. So, and I've wanted to I have my first cold of the season, and when COVID hit, I wanted to make a lot of elderberry syrup because it's got some antiviral properties and it was the thing to do. So every winter I now have at least a quart of a very strong elderberry syrup in my refrigerator. And with my cold day 2 or 3 here, I've started swigging on my stuff. I just swig on it. It's delicious because what I do is I cook it down gently on the stove, cook it down for, quite a while until a lot of the moisture's out, but not all of it because it's that moisture we want. So how long, it's kind of up to you. But I am cooking it. It does get softer. Yeah, the seeds are still in there. What I do is I let it cool down. I run it through a strainer and I squeeze it out really well with my hands. I want every drop of that liquid. So I'm not eating the seeds. I'm not eating the pulp. You could, but I want that liquid. And it's just a very dark, staining, beautiful juice. Okay. So I put it back on the stove, warm it up a little bit, and I add some other stuff to it. I'll put echinacea in there with or without an extra, either if it's a tincture, that's going to help preserve it. But if I just have echinacea root, I put that, I want more immune boosting, super immune boosting. Echinacea, astragalus, whatever I've got around. I will add more herbs that are going to go good with respiratory, antiviral. So I will add those. And I put in some of my Chinese 5-spice because I want it to taste good.
Mhm.
And lots of honey, lots of raw honey that I've gotten locally to taste. It's still warm, so it's enough to melt that honey, but not too
Alright.
hot. I don't want it to boil again. And then I just that's pretty much it. And so I've already strained it, and it's a strong juice that I've added some other things to it, cooked it a little while more.
Well,
Stick it in
thanks,
the fridge.
Becky, for those tips. I don't want to. Let's go on to some other questions
Okay,
here. We're in
sorry.
the
Sorry,
chat
not
here.
so long.
What's your Scott asks, what is your favorite mushroom field guide? And it's funny as Marco and I were chatting before we went live here, we each had brought a copy of uh, All the Rain Promises and More by David Oro. You're showing it as well, Scott. Yeah, there you go. It's I think in the spirit of looking for what's really tasty and avoiding what's really fatal, that it does a really good job of that. And you can, Marco, you want to talk a little bit about some of David Aurora's other work?
Well, yeah, I mean, so I have a copy of that too, and this is the book that I recommend to anyone who wants to get into mushrooms because it is small enough that it can go in your back pocket. So one of the really important things about choosing a mushroom guide is choose the one that you want to carry with you in the woods.
Mm.
And so that's why this one is really good. David Aurora also has the Bible as well, which is Mushrooms Demystified, which is thick and dirty and has been used by me for many years. And it is, I wouldn't necessarily recommend this unless you want to start looking at mushrooms that aren't necessarily good to eat. But it is a key that allows you to really go deep if you want to if you're like just wondering what a mushroom is and you want to really try and figure it out, like that's going to give you the tools to do it. But it may ask you to do a spore print. It may ask you to get out a dissecting microscope, so um, and then the other thing I would say is that uh, a, the a great mentor of mycologists in the Pacific Northwest is Michael Bugh, and he just put out a book called Mushrooms of Cascadia. And so I just would like to kind of pitch like the godfather of mushroom of mycology in the Pacific Northwest, who's retired evergreen professor and is a great guy, and he just put out a book. So we could also support Mike Bugh by buying Mushrooms of Cascadia. There are actually two books with that same title that are both out right now, but Michael Bugh's is the one I would recommend. So,
All right.
yeah.
Anyone, other people, maybe raise your hand and we'll call on you, or put a question in the chat as you prefer.
I've seen just there's some questions in here that let's see, mushroom field guide, we got that one. Other things that we like to forage. So, I could certainly talk about another one if we don't have another question. Unless there's another question. Yeah, all right. Well, so we were talking about spring, and so another kind of fun one is fern fiddleheads. You sometimes see those in kind of a culinary, like in restaurants and things like that. But the thing to know about fern fiddleheads is that not all ferns are created equal, and that there are one that I really would recommend, a second one that's pretty good, and a whole bunch that are no good at all. So the one that I would really recommend is the lady fern. And so what a fiddlehead is when the new frond of the fern is just coming up, it's like a curled little spiral. And when it's small and tender, you can cut it off, and then the best way to cook it is to blanch it in kind of a salty water like you would blanch a green bean, where it still has that bright, vibrant green color. And then just like I'll do if I want to keep a green bean really bright and green, then I'll just put it in a water bath and kind of shock it. And then you kind of set it aside, and then if you have some other thing that you're cooking, like a stir fry or something like that, you can kind of toss it in there, and it's already kind of been cooked, but you do want to cook them to tenderize them a little bit. Lady fern is sort of a very kind of lacy, very, very uh, um, uh, soft fern. That's the one that I think is edible and is good to eat. Deer fern, which is a very sort of straight frond without a lot of branching, is also okay, but it does have to be cooked a little more. It's not quite as tender. And then sword fern, don't even try. It's super bitter and super tough. Not worth messing around with at all. And then bracken fern is actually potentially dangerous. It's a carcinogenic. So yeah, you don't want to mess around with bracken fern fiddleheads at all.
Yeah.
And so yeah, that's kind of like the main ones that people would potentially see in, Western Washington, lowlands. But of those, it's the lady fern. So, get out your field guide and learn the lady fern, and then those fiddleheads in the spring are really delicious if you can get them when they're young and tender.
Hmm. All right, we
Um,
have a few more questions in the chat.
Hmm.
Yeah, is that what you're going to say, Lauren?
yeah, I was going to read off Esther's question.
Great.
Esther asked, "Are madrone berries edible for humans? My dog loves them, and I see the deer feasting on them."
I have never eaten a madrone berry, but I have eaten salal berries, which are very closely related.
Mhm.
So, I don't know. I'd probably try them. They're so closely related to salal and to the other, uh, you know, s- huckleberries and things. So, you know, that makes sense. Salal berries are, very gritty. So kind of similar to, maybe making a syrup out of them or something like that is a better use.
Mm.
Some people don't mind eating them. My kids eat them, but I I find them too gritty, personally. But huckleberries, I think, are just absolutely some of our favorites. And there's a whole bunch of different huckleberries that we have. Like in the lowlands around here, the two main ones that you're gonna see are the evergreen huckleberry, and the red huckleberry, and they have square stems. The red huckleberry like sheds its leaves in the winter time, and it's just a bare stem. And then whereas the evergreen huckleberry keeps its leaves all winter long, and is more of a blueberry. And then as you get into the kind of higher elevations, the black huckleberry, or mountain huckleberry, some people call it, is really good
Very
too.
good.
Um, and then like blueberries and huckleberries are kind of the same thing, but like the oval leaf blueberry or the Alaskan blueberries are the ones that you're going to find mostly just at elevation, around here. Uh,
So a good reason to go backpacking in the late summer
Absolutely, yeah, late summer. So that's
after the mosquitoes are gone, right?
right.
And the berries are out.
Yeah, totally. So, but I love those types of berries, and madrone or is a close relative of
Right?
those. So,
In the Heath family, the Ericaceae.
yeah.
All right. Well, one other, um, let's see, there's one other question here from Chris. Are there forest management practices that encourage mushroom foraging opportunities?
Hmm.
Um, that is such a good question.
That's a good. Yeah.
I don't know the answer to that. I suspect that, um, avoiding, like, I mean, for mycorrhizal fungi, once you develop a mycorrhizal network, you'd think that keeping the host plants alive, or enough host plants alive, so by thinning the forest rather than clear cutting it and regenerating it, you're probably going to encourage, you won't be starting from scratch to develop those new mycorrhizal networks. So
Yeah.
and that's my speculation. Um, I
Well,
know
Seth,
that,
I take it one step further and say that the ecological forestry practices that are championed by NNRG and that are practiced in all of your projects and in the Nisqually Community Forest allow for the forest floor and duff to stay moist because we are not exposing it to the full heat and power of the summer sun, which can kind of like bake away that upper duff layer and dry out those mycorrhizal networks. So
hmm,
by practicing selective logging and by practicing more of an ecological forestry perspective, like we are maintaining the moisture in the soil longer into the summer, and I think that's going to protect your
hmm.
mycorrhizal web.
I
Um,
will quote one other study that was done down in Southern Oregon, where they would cut the Douglas fir, and it's in the Douglas fir tan oak madrone region or forest system, and so then of course there was a school of thought in that you just what you really want to get growing next is the Douglas fir, so just spray the broadleaf vegetation with herbicide, and they found actually with trials that that actually reduced the productivity of the site because it had killed off the mycorrhizal networks that had survived just on the madrone and tan oak, which are stump sprouters. So even after all the overstory vegetation was cut, the those plants sprouted back. The mycorrhizae were still alive, but if you killed them off, then there was nothing to bridge to the next generation, as the madrone and tan oak had been doing, and before they practiced herbicide spraying.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. There's some really good follow-up questions about this topic in here. So one is making an observation that an overstocked early Doug-fir forest promotes truffles on our place, and after the late first thinning, the truffles are gone. And so I would love to talk about truffles. Truffles are sort of in a very exciting topic that are a whole can of worms, and something that is not very people don't really understand that we have really wonderful truffles here in the Pacific Northwest. And then it actually goes into this second question too. The next question, is there a way to seed chanterelles in young Doug fir forest to encourage establishment of mycorrhizal? So I got an answer that links those two questions. So, yes, a truffle is a mycorrhizal. And there is a researcher at the Evergreen State College who is a truffle expert, who's a new hire there, who has cracked the nut of how to almost farm truffles, like how to encourage them to grow in early stage Doug fir forests. And no one has ever done that with chanterelles, to my knowledge. I don't know of anyone who has ever successfully transplanted soil and resulting in chanterelles doing a transplant. I've never heard of that. But the fact that they figured it out with truffles is very encouraging, because it's basically the same thing. And then one thing I would just say about like truffles in general is that there is in Europe, there's long been a truffle industry where people have dogs or pigs that have been trained to go after truffles, and because they have this wonderful smell when they're ripe. There is unfortunately a trend in the Pacific Northwest where people trying to get truffles for selling will rake the forest in areas that they think there are truffles and just get them all up before they're ripe. And what you get there is a truffle that's really no good to eat, and it gives truffles a bad reputation because they haven't ripened to the point where they're aromatic, and so to harvest a truffle with a rake before it has ripened is really a useless thing to do. And that's sort of why there's sort of this new emergent kind of like exciting movement in the Pacific Northwest around truffle dogs and around training truffle dogs. There's a whole society that's really into it, and there's people who you can take classes in it. And this idea that, getting back to sort of those, European Italian roots of like having a trained dog and being a truffle forager who is only digging up the most ripe, perfect truffles, and then you have something that's worth a lot of money. People make a living just selling these highly prized white and black truffles to restaurants. But unfortunately, there was a glut of these low quality raked truffles that sort of gave truffles in the Northwest a bad name. Um, but yeah, truffles are very exciting and something that would love to get that researcher up into the community forest, and let's talk about how we can maybe create a secondary forest product of a truffle. But if I do that, I'm going to need a puppy that I can start to train. So,
I've to Esther's question, can you seed chanterelles in the young Douglas fir forest? I've always thought that maybe the time to do that would actually be when in the plugs, right? If you're raising them in plugs, and you plant the seed, it hasn't yet been colonized by any kind of mycorrhizal fungus, and it needs one. And so, I've never had enough chanterelles to propose this experiment to one of the nurseries we work with, like Fourth Corner. I'll bring you up some chanterelles, and you can, run them through a blender and just use them to water your Douglas fir seedlings and see how they. Right. Then of course it's a 20-year project to follow that and see if in fact the stand that you plant with those is going to bear chanterelles.
Yeah, I would think that you would want to maybe do it with huckleberry or something like that, and then do it as an understory thing, because that's really like more than Doug fir. I associate chanterelles with like huckleberries and things like that. So, because not every mycorrhizal is obligate to every
Hmm.
tree or every shrub.
Right.
Some of them have special relationships. I think with truffles, the Doug fir thing is pretty clearly established, though.
Mm.
With our truffles, I should say.
All right.
And if anyone wants a book about truffles, there's a great author, Rowan Jacobson, who's written many wonderful food and food related books. Who published a book last year called Truffle Hound. That's just I mean, if nothing else, he's such a good writer that it's fun to read. But he did come to the Pacific Northwest, and we took him around and took him to meet folks at Evergreen and kind of learn about some of these more newer things that are happening
Mm.
in the world of truffles.
Mm. I'm going to mention at least one other non-fungus foraging item that I'm very keen on, actually, and this is really only applicable to any of. Is anyone here from Coos Bay or farther south? Just put your thumb up in uh, on your screen there. Well, unfortunately not. Well, if you do find yourself south of Coos Bay in the fall, the Oregon myrtle, also known as the California Bay laurel, has a nut that is incredibly tasty and quite undervalued as a forest product. And so you have to gather them and let them cure, just sort of air dry them for a while and then roast them. But after all of that, it's a taste somewhere in between cocoa and coffee. So I highly recommend them. And it's only because the crops are so sporadic that I think that it has yet to fully penetrate the market as a commercial crop. Um, another is in this from the springtime, fir tips. I've some people like to just eat them right off the tree, and you can do that with hemlock tips as well, or following the example of elk, you could do that with cedar. Um, but I took it one year. I took it one step further and got some cheap vodka and put the fir tips through the blender and made what we called NNR gin. Um, that was just made little souvenir bottles for our board and staff. But very tasty. The only thing is it's not a stable flavor. So like you should drink it within the first 3 or 4 months. But when you first make it, it's like this incredible bright green from all the chlorophyll that gets extracted into the alcohol.
That's great. Yeah. Um, I guess one more. We're kind of getting to the end here, so we kind of got to bring out our uh, final favorites. One would be making a salad. Like, let's say that you wanted to make a salad in the forest. There's a few things, and maybe some of this is in the forest because we'd maybe have native things, but I'd probably also go to my garden where I would have like weeds that I don't necessarily want in my garden, but that are actually really good that people kind of overlook. So the first one, people have probably heard of is miner's lettuce. It's a lot of history behind it. It's a something that is, you'll see it a lot once you kind of know what to look for. They're kind of like not quite heart shaped. They're kind of like oblong and a long thin stem. And then in its flowering stage, it almost makes like a little lily pad that's really kind of distinctive. So you can look it up online to see what it looks like. But there's a long history of people eating that as a salad green. Um, and then dandelion, also not native, but the leaves of dandelion are a little bitter, but they are nice as a salad green as well. And then the one that we put in our salads a lot because it's a weed that's all over the place around here is purslane, which is kind of a little succulent. They're non-native, but once you kind of get it established in your garden or in your backyard, it's sort of everywhere. And it's a really really nice in a salad. And then the last one would be something that I wouldn't recommend eating a lot of, but but it has a great flavor. Is wood sorrel, which basically looks like a clover but bigger. and it has they're very tart, almost lemony. But the chemical in it that makes it tart is something that can upset your stomach if you eat a lot of it. But if you just eat one or two, or just put a little bit in a salad, it's no big deal, and it's really tastes great. So you could make a salad between the woods and your backyard or your friend's backyard over time, kind of using some of these things that people don't really think of as garden things that you would garden on your own.
Is that oxalis, wood sorrel?
Oxalis, yes. Yeah,
And so that's oxalic acid, which
correct.
besides upsetting your stomach
Upsetting your stomach if you were to eat
and
it,
your
it's not-
kidneys even, right?
Yeah, but just one or two. It's I don't know if I'm giving bad health advice, but I eat one or two when I go into the um, yeah.
Right.
And then I only have one more, which is kind of my final one, which is that big leaf maple is a tree that we have around here a lot, and when it puts out its catkins, its little flowers, its little sort of dangly flowers, you can make maple flower fritters, very similar to how you would make a zucchini flower fritter, like
Mm.
where you can like make a little batter, and then kind of dip them in and fry them, and they have a wonderful taste, and they're very tender. And so, yeah, zucchini flower fritters are really good. And then the other thing that my wife was doing with one of her classes, she's a college professor, was tapping maples and making maple syrup,
I've done that.
it absolutely works. It's not, you need a lot more of it. It's a lot waterier than sugar maple on the East Coast,
Mhm.
but it makes a really tasty maple syrup. You just have to get a big barrel and, boil a lot of it in order to make it work, or you only get a little bit of it. But
I think the better call there is actually to just drink the sap. It's kind of
yeah,
like coconut water has gotten to be a thing
yeah,
in recent years. I think there could be a similar future for maple sap.
yeah. It is much more watery than the sugar maple sap. So
Mhm.
yeah. So I mean, that's a few favorites there.
Mhm. Well, thanks for spending. We're down to the bottom of the hour here, and thanks for coming and spending part of your evening with us and around your respective fires. And we hope to see you again next month. Lauren, do we know what the topic is going to be for next month yet? Or
Yeah, next month is going to be environmental education. So we're going to be talking about NNRG's forestry curriculum that we've got coming out.
all right. Well, great. Well, thanks a lot, everyone, and have a great evening.